Over the weekend, the House of Representatives passed the HEROES Act. In late April, dozens of industry groups, including the influential Conservative Chamber of Congress, sent a letter to congressional leadership asking for direct subsidies for COBRA, expanding uses for health savings accounts, and increasing eligibility to access health insurance marketplaces. All sounds great, but if the Chamber of Commerce backs something, I usually feel like I can smell a rat back there. Here to talk about it is Akela Lacy, a politics reporter for The Intercept. She was previously The Intercept's inaugural Ady Barkan Reporting Fellow. Ady Barkan. She has also worked at Politico and at the Pulitzer Center covering breaking news and immigration. Thanks for joining us on the program today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Can you talk a little bit about the HEROES Act? And what regarding healthcare, what does it do and what do we need to know?
So the main healthcare related provisions in the HEROES Act are expansions of subsidies for COBRA, which is a program that people can apply for if they've been furloughed or laid off to keep their existing healthcare plans. So the package also provides subsidies and reimbursements, I guess, for premiums directly paid to health insurers. And it covers premiums for COBRA plans. So people don't have to cover those, whereas COBRA historically has been pretty cost prohibitive, specifically because it can cost between $7,000 for an individual to $20,000 a year for a family. So the big selling point, at least for Democrats who not only agree to this, but were pushing for it, is that this covers premiums for people. But in reality, it's putting a Band-Aid on a pretty ineffective program anyway. It doesn't do anything to help people who didn't have coverage before this. There's more than 27 million people who didn't have health insurance coverage before the pandemic even hit. And going down the road, this program if it passes, it would expire at the end of January 31st, 2021. So that's a pretty short time frame to figure out.
Everything's going to be completely better and fixed by then.
Right.
Yeah. We're good.
Right. So, I mean, looking at the people that this doesn't help, and I'll get into a little bit more specifics on that in a second, but the idea that it's kind of a short-term fix to a kind of falling apart program anyway is really angering and upsetting to a lot of people who are hearing from their leadership that they're going to be able to, all these great things are coming, but they're not seeing it come into fruition. Yeah. I will also note that this is a little bit in the weeds for COBRA, but it's great for people who were already on, pretty high quality plans and that weren't under high cost sharing, obligations. But for low wage workers, people who were on low quality healthcare plans who already had high cost sharing, COBRA is probably more expensive than going on Medicaid for a lot of people. So this doesn't really help people who were already struggling the most to afford health coverage in the first place.
So the Chamber of Commerce being for it, what does this, I just assume this will be good then for health insurance industries. You talked a lot in your article about how the lobbying groups for health insurance industries want people on their employer mandate, employer covered health care. Can you talk about what that means to the insurance companies to keep COVID going?
They're going to be able to kind of cover most of the losses of premiums that they would be facing right now with so many people who are applying for unemployment and losing insurance tied to their jobs. So they're happy about that. They were in constant communication about this. They've been pushing for it. We reported specifically on a call that the America's Health Insurance Plans, which is I think it's the second biggest lobbying group on the health industry, which represents major insurers. They were specifically asking conservative members of the Congressional Democratic Blue Dog Caucus to push for these premium protections in the next packages. And so I think they're kind of saying, this is good because, it helps companies, but also it helps people keep their insurance. But I think the underlying argument there, and this is someone who was on the call who works for a health insurer pointed this out to me, they're quoted in the story. They said it was a curious stance being taken that they're, prioritizing maintaining their their profitability when a lot of these companies reported first quarter profits and said that they weren't expecting to take a financial hit.
Yeah, that was the thing about your article that just raises the blood pressure. So health insurance companies are doing just fine. It seems like they would. I mean, if you're just thinking about it from a lay person's perspective, you'd think, gee, the health insurance companies are finally going to have to pay out all that cash, and then there's going to go down. So, what explains the fact that they're making great profit right now?
So there's a lot of caveats to just looking at first quarter profits, and we explain this a little bit, but and companies say, yes, we've boasted that we're doing well right now, but we might not see the financial impacts of this until Q2 or Q3 reports come out. But at the same time, they're also arguing that they need protection right now, in the form of not only not necessarily providing a public option for people who are, trying to figure out what they're going to do if they just got laid off or furloughed, but making sure that companies are still receiving the number of or the amount of premiums that they would have been before. Yeah.
It seems like something fishy's going on.
Yeah, so I guess the more coherent point of all of that is that, yes, it's good for people to keep their insurance, but people need to keep in mind that these companies were already making massive profits, and it's putting a lot of band-aids on an industry that was not doing enough for people and wasn't designed to meet this moment. So it's kind of like, why are we still barking up this tree? And I think that's the question that I'm hearing from people, particularly, talking to people who are running in upcoming elections. A lot of voters are really confused about what this means for them and like why this is what's being pushed as the number one solution right now.
Yeah, I wonder, why is this being pushed by Democrats as the number one solution right now? I mean, we have some Democrats who are supposedly progressive. Joe Biden is the front runner is supposedly taking on more progressive stances. It's a great dog whistle to say we're going to keep everyone on their employee covered healthcare, even if they don't have a job. Well, that's great, but it's not as great as if we just say, okay, everyone has healthcare, and we mean everyone, from everyone who doesn't have a job to everyone who had a job right before this, to people who had low-paying jobs with no insurance, to gig and economy folks. I mean, it seems to me like this is just a cover-up so that the masses don't get hip to the fact that, Medicare for all would be the answer to all of this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would remember that or remind people that Democrats were arguing even before coronavirus for years that the best option right now to fix the healthcare crisis that existed before the current crisis was to fix the Affordable Care Act. They're still arguing for that. They're still pushing, and expanding COBRA has, I think, been part of that conversation for I'm not sure how long, but obviously they're tying it right now to repairing the ACA and moving forward with that after whatever this ends. So I think we're seeing a lot of reporting on progressives who have sponsored Medicare for all legislation and gotten momentum on those bills in the past couple of years being kind of written out of the process. There's very few people writing these bills, and they're having trouble, one-on-one negotiation hasn't gotten their stuff actually into bill text. And the strategy right now seems to be including more priorities for the caucus, not necessarily from progressives, and not necessarily striking these other things that we're seeing being pushed by the chamber and other lobbying groups.
We're speaking with Akela Lacy. She is a writer for the Intercept. Her recent piece was about the HEROES Act and healthcare. Has the act passed?
So there's a Senate companion bill that's under negotiation right now. So it hasn't passed Congress yet.
And what would you suggest that the most progressive people who may want to take action around this issue do in this case? Do they say, hey, don't pass this COBRA thing, let's get Medicare for all? I mean, what's the best action?
Oh gosh, that is a hard question. It's
going to make us as activists look terrible to say, let's work against giving people healthcare and COBRA.
There are some groups that are trying to organize around addressing certain priorities on the legislative level. I don't know that that extends to the healthcare issue at this current moment, because there are so many other things like immediate payments and things that progressives are pushing for in the short term. But I would encourage people to just read and try and get as much information as they can about what is actually going into these bills, and support, your preferred outlets that are doing that, because I think I think as long as people can educate themselves about this stuff, then they can know like what their representatives are doing and whether they want to continue to support them.
Thank you so much. And thanks again for being on the program. I really appreciate it. I wish you luck. We really need the Intercept. So everyone go there and support the Intercept for the great journalism that is done there. Akela Lacy, any final words before we head off?
No, but thank you for having me. And stay tuned for the Senate companion bill. We'll probably be covering that. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, great.